Imagine hiking for hours into the mountains. The trees disappear. The trail becomes rock. Snow is still sitting in the shadows, even in summer. Then you reach a small lake more than 2,000 meters above sea level. There is no road. A waterfall blocks the stream below. Nothing about this place looks connected to the world beneath it. And then a trout swims past your feet. Fish cannot walk uphill, so how did it get here? The first answer is that some fish really can reach mountain lakes on their own. If a lake connects to a river or stream without an impossible barrier, fish can slowly move upstream over generations. During floods and snowmelt, connections can appear that do not exist for most of the year. But many famous alpine lakes have something different below them. Cliffs, waterfalls, long stretches of water a trout simply cannot cross. In Yosemite, for example, lakes and streams above about 4,000 feet were historically fishless in many areas because glaciers carved steep waterfalls that blocked fish from moving higher. So when you find trout above those barriers, the mountain itself is telling you something. They probably did not swim there, maybe they flew. For generations, people repeated the idea that fish eggs stick to the feet or feathers of ducks, then fall into another lake. But scientists struggled to find strong evidence that this happens often enough to explain entire fish populations. Then the story changed. In 2020, researchers fed fertilized common carp and Prussian carp eggs to 8 mallard ducks. Most of the eggs did not make it through intact. A tiny number did. About 0.2% survived the trip through the duck. Some still contained living embryos. 3 eventually hatched. 1 egg remained inside a duck for between 4 and 6 hours before coming out. Long enough, in theory, for a flying mallard to travel hundreds of kilometers. And a later experiment tested eggs from 9 different fish groups. Viable embryos survived in several of them. So yes, under the right conditions, a fish can effectively reach another body of water by air. Just not in the way people imagined. The egg may travel inside the bird, but there is an important catch. Those experiments were not done with mountain trout, and they do not prove that ducks filled the high lakes of the Rockies or Sierra Nevada with fish. For many of those lakes, the real answer is sitting in old notebooks, maps, and government records. Humans carried them there. In Yosemite, the first recorded fish stocking in the area happened in 1877. 2 years later, 20,000 trout were placed into streams in Yosemite Valley. Then people started going higher. At first, small fish were carried by hand in containers. Later, mules hauled them into the mountains. Imagine hiking a narrow trail for hours while carrying a moving tank of tiny trout toward a lake that had never contained a fish. By the 20th century, humans found a faster method: airplanes. Aerial stocking began in Yosemite in 1952. Small fish could now be released into remote lakes that might take a person an entire day to reach on foot. From the first recorded stocking in 1877 through 1990, more than 33 million fish were stocked into Yosemite lakes and streams. 33 million. A landscape that looks completely wild can therefore contain an animal that arrived because someone carried it there decades ago. In the Pyrenees, researchers studied 520 high mountain lakes. More than 98% had natural barriers that would have prevented fish from reaching them from below. Yet written records of trout introductions there go back to 1371. By 1900, trout had already been introduced into about a quarter of the lakes studied. After modern stocking expanded during the 20th century, trout were present in more than half. So a fish population can look ancient even when its history began with a person walking up a mountain. What happens when the records are missing? In 2025 and 2026, researchers reconstructed fish introductions across 117 remote mountain lakes in Olympic National Park. Field crews traveled about 500 miles and climbed a combined 200,000 feet while collecting tiny samples of water. They were looking for environmental DNA, microscopic traces left behind by animals living in the lake. Historical records showed that more than 1.6 million fish had been carried or flown into lakes in the region beginning in 1930. Some lakes were stocked once. Others were stocked as many as 18 times. The DNA surveys still found fish in lakes where no stocking record could be found. That does not automatically mean birds brought them. The old records may be incomplete. Someone may have moved fish without recording it. Or fish may have reached a connected lake from somewhere nearby. A century later, the evidence can become almost invisible. And that is what makes mountain lakes so deceptive. We look at a clear lake surrounded by rock and snow and assume everything inside it must have arrived naturally. Sometimes that is true. Some fish followed water uphill while the route was open. Some populations may begin with eggs moved by birds. But many high mountain trout are there because humans wanted fish in places where nature had left none. And once the fish were there, they did not need another mule or airplane. If the lake had enough food, oxygen, and suitable places to reproduce, a small introduced population could become self-sustaining. A few fish brought up a trail could become thousands of descendants. The person who carried the first container disappears from history. The fish remain. That may be the strangest part of the whole story. You can stand beside a mountain lake that looks untouched for miles in every direction, watch a trout move through perfectly clear water, and think you are looking at ancient wilderness. But sometimes you are looking at a decision someone made 100 years ago,